On the evening of May 26, 2014, a newborn vanished from a maternity ward in Trois-Rivières. Less than 3 hours later, police officers drove their shoulders into the door of a small apartment, the frame splintering under the force, the smell of stale air and medication rushing out to meet them. There had been no screaming, no alarms, no struggle anyone could remember. What waited on the other side of that broken door would force an entire province to confront how easily trust can be carried away in human arms. The maternity wing at St. Marie Hospital runs on a gentle, repetitive rhythm. Fluorescent lights hum overhead without flicker. Doors open and close softly, releasing brief currents of warmer air before sealing again. The smell of antiseptic never fully fades, but it is softened here by fabric, by skin, by the faint sweetness of baby powder that clings to the corridors. Melissa McMahon lies awake in one of the rooms, her body resting against white pillows that still feel unfamiliar beneath her shoulders. She is in her early 20s, her face marked by exhaustion more than pain, eyes alert even as her movements remain careful and restrained. When she shifts, she does so slowly, testing the limits of her body, learning what it allows now. Her breathing stays steady, controlled, the way it has been taught to be. Motherhood at this moment is not a concept to her. It is physical. Victoria Boisclair sleeps beside her. She fits easily within the clear plastic walls of the bassinet, a small shape wrapped in cotton and warmth. Her fists remain clenched near her chest, fingers curled inward, skin still carrying the uneven tones of a body newly introduced to air. The smell of her is subtle but distinct, clean, milky, warm, noticeable only when Melissa leans close enough to breathe it in deliberately. Melissa does this often. She reaches out with 2 fingers and rests them against Victoria's leg, not to adjust anything, not to wake her, but simply to feel the heat through the fabric. Each breath lifts the baby's chest just enough to be seen. Each exhale releases a soft sound, barely audible over the low hum of the room. Melissa watches this rise and fall without blinking, committing the motion to memory. The room itself is sparse, functional. A rolling tray holds folded towels stacked with clinical precision. A chair sits unused against the wall, its vinyl seat cool to the touch. Melissa's personal belongings are gathered together in one corner, clothes folded neatly, a phone plugged into the wall, its screen lighting up intermittently with messages from family and friends. A small stuffed toy rests near the bassinet, its fabric bright, untouched, waiting. Visitors arrive in short intervals. They speak in lowered voices, instinctively matching the tone of the space. They lean forward to look at Victoria, their expressions softening as they take in her size, her stillness. Melissa answers their questions patiently. Yes, she is tired. Yes, everything went well. Yes, she is beautiful. The conversations repeat themselves, each one reinforcing the reality of what has just begun. Between visits, the room settles back into quiet. Nurses move through the ward with practiced ease, their presence steady, predictable. Their shoes make brief, rhythmic sounds against the linoleum. Their uniforms blend into the environment so completely they feel permanent, part of the building itself. They check on Melissa, ask how she is feeling, adjust small details without ceremony. Their badges catch the light when they turn, then disappear again as they move on. Melissa does not scrutinize them. She does not need to. The routine is familiar, reassuring. This is how care looks. This is how safety sounds. When the room empties again, Melissa turns her attention back to Victoria. She traces the outline of her daughter's cheek with her eyes, notes the faint crease near her ear, the delicate line of dark hair along her scalp. She counts breaths without realizing she is counting. Time stretches, not forward, but outward, filling the space with something calm and complete. Outside the window, Trois-Rivières continues uninterrupted. Cars pass through intersections. Voices drift upward from the street below. Somewhere nearby, life moves on at its usual pace, unaware of the small, self-contained universe unfolding inside this room. Monday, May 26, 2014. The ward transitions into evening with mechanical precision. Shift notes are exchanged at the central station, voices kept low, pens moving steadily across paper while a wall clock marks time with quiet insistence. The lighting remains unchanged, flattening shadows and giving the corridor the same neutral calm it has held all day. At 6:58, the elevator doors open at the far end of the floor. A woman steps out wearing standard hospital scrubs, the fabric clean, the fit unremarkable, an identification badge resting against her chest. She pauses only long enough to orient herself, then turns left and proceeds toward the maternity rooms at a pace that matches the flow around her. Her name is Valerie Poulin Collins. She moves through the corridor without drawing attention, passing staff members, visitors, and equipment carts as though she belongs exactly where she is. No one stops her, no one addresses her, and no one questions her presence as she approaches a door marked with the name McMahon. At 7 o'clock, she knocks once and enters. Inside, the room is softly lit, the curtains partially drawn, the air warm and still. Melissa McMahon lies in bed, propped against pillows, her movements slow and deliberate, her body clearly tired but alert. Beside her, a clear plastic bassinet holds her daughter, Victoria Boisclair, asleep and wrapped in cotton. Valerie closes the door behind her. "I'm here to take her to be weighed," she says, her voice even, professional, neither rushed nor tentative. Melissa turns her head toward the bassinet, then back to Valerie, and nods. The request fits seamlessly into the rhythm of the day, indistinguishable from the other procedures that have already taken place. She does not sit up or ask for clarification. Valerie steps closer and lifts Victoria from the bassinet, supporting her head and body with practiced care. The baby stirs briefly, releasing a small sound before settling again as Valerie draws her close. A blue hospital-issued blanket is folded around Victoria, secured with careful, efficient movements. "Do you need anything else?" Valerie asks, already angling her body toward the door. "No," Melissa replies quietly. Valerie exits the room. The door closes at 7:03. In the hallway, Valerie walks toward the exit, carrying Victoria against her chest. Two nurses stand nearby reviewing medication notes, one glancing up momentarily before returning her attention to the chart. Valerie continues past them without interruption, her pace steady and unremarkable. A ceiling-mounted security camera captures her movement as she crosses its field of view, the timestamp glowing in the corner of the frame. She does not look toward it, nor does she alter her stride as she passes beneath it. At the exit, the doors slide open. Outside, the air is cooler, the light thinning as evening settles over the city. Valerie crosses the short distance to a red Toyota Yaris parked nearby, the baby on board sticker visible on the rear window. She opens the passenger door, places Victoria carefully onto the seat, adjusts the blanket once more, and closes the door. At 7:08, the car leaves the hospital grounds. Inside the maternity room, Melissa rests with her eyes closed, the quiet settling around her. She shifts slightly, feeling the familiar ache in her body, and reaches for the cup of water beside her bed. The bassinet remains empty, but she does not register it immediately. Several minutes pass. At approximately 7:15, Melissa turns her head toward the bassinet and stops. Her hand lifts instinctively, then hesitates, hovering where the clear plastic edge should be. She pushes herself upright with effort, glancing at the clock on the wall before pressing the call button. A nurse enters and pauses just inside the doorway, her eyes moving quickly from Melissa to the bassinet. "How long does the weighing usually take?" Melissa asks, her voice controlled but tight. The nurse checks the chart in her hands, then looks back at the bassinet. "We didn't take her," she says. Melissa shakes her head once. "A nurse came. She said she was." "No one was sent from this ward," the nurse replies, already stepping back into the hallway. The change in pace is immediate. Voices sharpen as staff members gather, information exchanged in clipped sentences. Doors open, bassinets are checked, numbers confirmed, and a supervisor begins directing movement with concise instructions. Phones are lifted, notes are taken, and the ward's earlier calm gives way to focused urgency. At 7:20, a code is announced overhead. Security personnel move to exits. Elevators are halted, and radio traffic increases as details are relayed. The atmosphere tightens, every action now deliberate and coordinated. Melissa grips the edge of the bed, her hands unsteady against the sheets. "Where is she?" she asks. "In the security office," Surveillance footage scrolls backward until a familiar image appears, a woman in a nurse's uniform carrying a blue-wrapped infant. The sequence plays across multiple cameras, tracking her path from hallway to exit, then to the parking area where a red Toyota Yaris pulls away. Across the hospital, the same understanding settles almost simultaneously.
Victoria Boisclair is no longer inside the building, and the manner of her departure, quiet, orderly, unchallenged, hangs heavily in the air as staff continue to move. Now fully aware that routine itself has been the pathway, the maternity ward no longer feels insulated from the outside world. Security personnel take positions at each exit, standing still but alert, their radios pressed close to their shoulders as short instructions pass back and forth.
Elevators remain locked on the current floors, doors held open while staff monitor anyone attempting to leave, eyes scanning faces and hands rather than uniforms. In Melissa McMahon's room, the atmosphere tightens with each passing minute. She sits upright now, gripping the edge of the bed, her breathing uneven despite her effort to control it, her eyes fixed on the doorway, as if expecting someone to appear carrying Victoria back into the room. No one offers reassurance they cannot confirm. A supervisor enters, followed by 2 officers from Trois-Rivières police. They introduce themselves quickly, voices calm but direct, and begin asking questions in a precise sequence. What time did the nurse arrive? What did she say? What did she look like? Melissa answers carefully, pausing to concentrate, her brow furrowing as she reconstructs details that had seemed insignificant only moments earlier. She wore scrubs, Melissa says. She had a badge. She didn't rush.
And quote, the officers exchange a glance and write it down. In the security office, footage from every available camera is now pulled up across multiple screens. A technician rewinds and advances frame by frame, confirming timestamps, tracing the woman's path through the building, noting the absence of hesitation at every doorway. Officers lean forward as they watch, their focus narrowing to posture, gait, the way the infant is held. She moves like staff, one officer says quietly.
Outside, patrol units begin circling the immediate area, headlights cutting through the growing darkness as officers search for the red Toyota Yaris seen on the footage. License plate databases are queried, descriptions broadcast over radio channels, and nearby intersections are alerted to remain observant for a small car with a visible baby on board sticker. At police headquarters, the situation escalates rapidly. Detectives confer in short bursts, weighing criteria, reviewing available information, and comparing the circumstances against established protocols. A newborn has been taken from a medical facility. There is visual confirmation. There is a vehicle description. The threshold is met. The decision is made. At approximately 7:35, the Amber Alert system is activated. Across Quebec, phones vibrate and screens light up almost simultaneously. The alert flashes details in stark utilitarian language. A female infant, taken from a hospital in Trois-Rivières. A woman posing as medical staff. A red Toyota Yaris. Highway signs update. Radio stations interrupt their programming. Inside the hospital, staff members become aware of the alert through their own phones, the glow of screens punctuating the already tense environment. Information that had been confined to rooms and hallways now spills outward, expanding beyond the building, beyond the city, into thousands of private spaces all at once. At Melissa's bedside, an officer explains what has been done. The alert is out, he says. People are looking. Melissa nods, though her hands continue to tremble against the sheets. In homes, cars, and cafes across the province, the image from the hospital's security footage begins to circulate. The woman's face, the angle of her shoulders, the blue-wrapped infant, all shared, reposted, magnified as individuals forward the alert to friends and family, with brief messages urging attention. The investigation shifts shape. What had been confined to law enforcement channels now moves through social networks at a speed no official system can replicate, carried by people scanning their surroundings more closely, replaying memories, matching faces to places they have seen before. In Trois-Rivières, 4 young adults sit together, phones in hand, reading the alert. They study the image carefully, not with detached curiosity, but with the focus of recognition trying to surface. One of them, Charlene Plant, tilts her head slightly, her eyes narrowing as she looks again at the woman's face, then at the car description beneath it. "I know her," she says slowly. The others look up. Charlene scrolls back to the image, her finger hovering over the screen as she searches her memory, replaying moments, locations, conversations. The recognition settles not as certainty at first, but as a growing alignment of details that refuse to stay abstract. "She used to live near me," Charlene says. "The police were there sometimes." The group exchanges glances, the mood shifting as the implications register. They do not call immediately. Instead, they gather their things, keys jangling as they stand, the decision forming through shared understanding rather than spoken debate. They get into a car. As they drive, the city passes by outside the windows, ordinary and unchanged, intersections illuminated, traffic flowing normally. Charlene gives directions from memory, guiding them toward an apartment complex she has not visited in some time but recognizes clearly enough. When they arrive, they slow near the entrance. A red Toyota Yaris is parked outside. The baby on board sticker is still on the rear window. They sit in silence for a moment, staring through the windshield, each detail confirming what the alert alone could not. Light spills from one of the apartment windows above, steady and unmistakable in the evening dark. Charlene reaches for her phone. She dials 911. Time stretches unevenly across the city. In the maternity ward at St. Marie Hospital, the lights remain fixed at full brightness, flattening every surface, leaving no corner untouched by visibility. Melissa McMahon stays seated upright in her bed, her back rigid, her hands clasped together in her lap, fingers interlaced so tightly that the joints ache, her eyes tracking every movement in the hallway beyond her door. Officers come and go, their presence constant but restrained, their voices kept low as they exchange updates just out of earshot. When they speak to Melissa, they do so carefully, repeating information already shared, not to reassure her, but to keep her anchored in the sequence of events that now defines everything. In the security office, the footage loops continuously. The same images repeat across the monitors. The woman in scrubs moving through the corridor, the blue-wrapped infant held close, the exit doors sliding open. Each replay draws more attention to details that had seemed ordinary at first. The badge placement, the angle of her shoulders, the absence of urgency in her stride. Outside the hospital, the alert moves faster than any patrol car. Phones buzz and screens illuminate across Trois-Rivières, across neighboring towns, across places where people have paused their evenings to read the same short message again and again. A newborn, a woman posing as medical staff, a small red car. The words sink in unevenly, stirring discomfort, curiosity, concern. In living rooms, people lower the volume on their televisions. In cars, drivers glance more carefully at the vehicles around them. In kitchens, conversations stop mid-sentence as someone scrolls back to the image, studying the woman's face with renewed attention. Recognition does not arrive dramatically. It surfaces quietly, unevenly, as memories begin to align with what is on the screen. A woman seen before, a face that feels familiar without immediately yielding a name, a car that matches too closely to ignore. Among those studying the alert is Charlene Plante. She sits with friends, phone resting in her hand, her attention narrowing as she looks again at the image provided by police. She tilts the screen slightly, adjusting the angle, focusing on the woman's features, her posture, the way she holds the infant. Something in the alignment of those details refuses to let go. "I've seen her," Charlene says, more to herself than to the others. The words hang in the air, tentative, unfinished. She scrolls back through the alert, rereading the description, matching it against fragments of memory, an apartment, past encounters, police presence that once felt incidental. The pieces do not yet form a full picture, but they press insistently against one another, demanding closer attention. Around the city, others experience the same hesitation. People pause before sharing, before calling, before acting, caught between uncertainty and the weight of what the alert implies. The city remains outwardly unchanged, streets lit, traffic flowing, buildings quiet, while beneath that surface, attention sharpens collectively. In the hospital, Melissa stares at the doorway as footsteps approach, then pass. No one brings news. The minutes continue to accumulate, each one stretching the space between what is known and what remains just out of reach. While across Trois-Rivières, recognition begins to crystallize, not yet into action, but into something that can no longer be dismissed. Monday night, May 26, 2014. Between 10 o'clock and 10:10 p.m., Trois-Rivières, Quebec. Charlene Plante does not argue with the feeling in her chest. She sits forward, elbows on her knees, phone held close enough that the light washes her fingertips pale, and she studies the image again until it stops being a photograph and becomes a map back to a place she remembers. Her friends watch her face change in small increments, eyes narrowing, mouth tightening, the pause before she speaks. Because recognition rarely arrives as certainty, it arrives as insistence. "I know her," Charlene says, voice low, controlled, as if saying it louder might make it less true. Mélisande Bergeron leans in to see the screen, and Cherelle Bergeron follows, their shoulders touching briefly as they crowd around the phone. Marc-André Coté stays slightly back, eyes moving between Charlene and the image, waiting for the next sentence that turns a thought into a decision. Charlene scrolls, rereads the description, then looks up, her gaze fixing on a point beyond the room as she reconstructs a memory with the same careful sequence the police have been using all night. She remembers an apartment building. She remembers the shape of the parking area. She remembers police cars arriving there on other occasions, lights flashing against brick and glass, the kind of scene that stays in your mind even when you stop thinking about it. "She used to be my neighbor," Charlene says, and the words land heavier now that she has given them an address. The group moves without ceremony. Keys are gathered, jackets are pulled on. The air outside hits their faces with a coolness that makes them blink harder. And as they step into the night, the city looks unchanged, streetlights steady, traffic sparse, distant voices muffled by evening, while their attention sharpens into something narrow and purposeful. They get into a car. Charlene takes the front passenger seat so she can keep her phone visible, the image ready, the description ready, the details repeated silently until they become instinct. Marc-André drives, hands steady on the wheel, while Mélisande and Cherelle sit in the back, watching through the side windows as the streets slide past. Charlene gives directions from memory. Her voice stays even, but she speaks in short phrases, as if longer sentences would introduce doubt. They turn onto a familiar road, then another, and the city's ordinary features, stores closed for the night, a bus stop with no one waiting, a row of darkened windows, pass by like scenery that does not understand what it is adjacent to. When they reach the apartment complex, Marc-André slows. Charlene leans forward, scanning the area immediately, her eyes searching for a specific shade of red among parked vehicles. A detail from the alert that now feels as critical as a name. The car is there, a red Toyota Yaris. The baby on board sticker sits on the rear window, exactly where the alert says it should be, catching the weak light from a street lamp and reflecting it back in a small, unmistakable rectangle. No one speaks for a moment. The engine idles. Their breaths fog the inside of the windshield slightly, and Marc-André reaches up to adjust the heater, then stops halfway through the motion as if even that small sound feels too loud. Above them, one apartment window glows with steady light, the curtains drawn, the illumination leaking around the edges. Charlene holds her phone up again, aligning what she sees with what she has been staring at for the last hour. "It's her place," she says, and the certainty in her voice comes not from emotion but from the alignment of details that refuse to be anything else. She dials 911. The dispatcher answers, voice calm, trained, and Charlene speaks in a careful rush that keeps each fact intact. The red Toyota Yaris, the sticker, the address, the lit window, her familiarity with the woman in the alert. The dispatcher asks them to stay in the car and keep their distance, and Charlene nods even though the dispatcher cannot see it. As soon as she ends the call, the wait begins again, but it feels different now. It is no longer uncertainty stretching time. It is anticipation, a tight coil in the chest, a mind running through possibilities it refuses to name. The group keeps their eyes on the building, watching for any movement at the entrance, any silhouette in the lit window, any change in the parked car that might signal motion. Minutes pass. Then, faint at first, the sound of sirens reaches them, low and distant, sliding through the night air in a way that makes their shoulders tighten automatically. The sound grows louder, then resolves into multiple vehicles, and red and blue lights begin to flicker against nearby parked cars, turning the dark lot into brief pulses of color and reflection. Police cars arrive in a controlled formation. Officers step out quickly, not running, but moving with a speed that signals urgency without chaos, hands already placed near radios and belts, eyes scanning the building and the vehicle. One officer approaches Charlene's car, crouching slightly to speak through the cracked window. "Did you call?" he asks. Charlene nods, holding up her phone, the alert still visible on the screen. "That's the car," she says, voice steady, finger pointing toward the Toyota Yaris. The officer follows her gesture, then straightens and speaks into his radio, relaying the confirmation in clipped, professional language. Other officers fan out, some positioning themselves to watch exits, others moving toward the building entrance with purposeful steps. They do not knock at first. They test the door. They listen. They exchange a brief look that is less conversation than agreement. And then one officer shifts his weight, planting a foot firmly, bracing, preparing for force that must be decisive. The door gives way. Wood splinters. Hinges strain. The sound is sharp in the quiet night, echoing briefly through the stairwell as officers move inside, flashlights cutting narrow beams through the dimness. Their boots strike steps in quick succession, and the air changes as they enter. Stale warmth, the faint smell of cooked food long cooled, and beneath it, something sharper, medicinal, lingering. They move up the stairs. At the landing, an officer raises a hand, pausing the group for a fraction of a second as he listens again. Head turned slightly toward a closed door. No voices come from inside. No footsteps. No sudden movement. He signals. Two officers step forward, one reaching for the handle, the other angling his body to the side, prepared to enter quickly. The handle turns. The door opens into a dimly lit apartment, light spilling from a lamp in the living room. They enter. The living room is small, furnished with the ordinary clutter of daily life. Shoes near the wall, a jacket draped over a chair, a cup on a table that has not been washed. The air holds a distinct chemical smell, the kind that clings to the back of the throat, and one officer's nostrils flare as he scans the space, eyes moving from room to room. Police. An officer calls, voice loud enough to fill the apartment, controlled enough to remain clear. No one answers. They move farther in, clearing each room with practice sequence, flashlights sweeping across floors and countertops and doorways. In the bedroom, they find a woman on the floor, Valerie Poulin-Collins. She lies motionless, her skin pale, her lips slightly parted, empty medication containers visible nearby, the air around her thick with the bitter scent of pills. One officer kneels beside her immediately, checking for responsiveness, while another speaks into a radio, calling for paramedics with urgency that sharpens his voice. "She's unresponsive," he says. In the same sweep of motion, another officer searches for the infant. He follows sound first, any small noise, any breath, then sight, scanning blankets, baskets, any place a newborn could be. The apartment feels too quiet, but then, near the living area, he sees it. A small bundle positioned carefully, wrapped in fabric, the shape unmistakably human, even before he reaches it. He steps closer. Victoria is there. The baby is alive and quiet, wrapped snugly, her skin warm when the officer checks, her chest rising and falling in small, steady movements that make the room feel, for the first time since they entered, less airless. The officer's posture shifts subtly as he lifts her with extreme care, supporting her head and neck, holding her as though she might shatter if handled without precision. "We've got the baby," he says into the radio, and his voice changes on the word baby, becoming fractionally softer without losing clarity. Paramedics arrive moments later, their equipment clinking softly as they enter, the smell of clean plastic and latex briefly cutting through the stale apartment air. They move straight to Valerie, checking vitals, placing monitors, working quickly and quietly, while an officer remains nearby, maintaining custody and scene control. Victoria is carried out. Outside, The night air feels colder, sharper, as if the apartment's stale warmth had been its own enclosed world. Officers keep their bodies angled to block sightlines from curious onlookers beginning to appear at windows and doorways. While one officer cradles Victoria against his chest, the infant's blanket pulled close to protect her from the cool air. Charlene and her friends remain in their car, watching. They do not cheer. They do not speak. The relief is visible instead in how their shoulders drop, in how Charlene's hand loosens around her phone, in the way Melisande exhales a breath she did not realize she was holding until it leaves her. An officer approaches their car again. "You did the right thing," he says, voice subdued, professional, and Charlene nods without responding, because the words feel too small for what has just happened. At the hospital, information moves faster than people. A call comes in to St. Marie, and staff relay it with controlled urgency, voices low but energized. The message passed from desk to desk until it reaches the room where Melissa waits. An officer steps into her doorway, posture straight, eyes steady, and he speaks with the careful clarity of someone handling fragile truth. "We found her," he says. Melissa's body reacts before her voice does. Her hands fly to her mouth. Her shoulders fold inward. A sound escapes her. That is not a word. Not a cry, something between disbelief and release. She nods repeatedly, tears gathering without restraint now, her breath coming in uneven bursts as she tries to form a sentence. She begins, unable to finish. "She's safe," the officer says, keeping his tone steady, grounding the room with certainty. "She's coming back to you. Iv." Melissa closes her eyes and presses her forehead briefly against her clasped hands, as if holding herself upright requires concentration. When she looks up again, the room is the same. The lights still humming, the sheets still white, but the air inside it feels altered, thinner, capable of moving again. Outside the apartment building, Valerie Poulin-Collins is transported for medical care. Her body monitored, her breathing assisted, the scene controlled and documented as officers begin the next phase of their work. The red Toyota Yaris remains parked under streetlight glare, the baby on board sticker still in the window, now illuminated as evidence rather than decoration. The night does not end with silence. It ends with paperwork, with statements taken, with officers replaying the sequence to ensure no detail is missed, with paramedics calling out vital signs, with radios confirming locations and custody, with the city's attention still sharpened by the alert that has not yet been canceled. And in the center of it all, Victoria Boisclair, 16 hours old when she was carried out of a hospital room, breathes steadily in the arms of the people who are now focused on returning her to the only place she belongs. The hospital receives Victoria back quietly. There is no announcement, no gathering in the hallway, only a controlled transfer through doors that now open with heightened attention, hands moving with deliberate care. A nurse carries the infant into the maternity ward, her steps slower than before, her grip precise, as if the weight in her arms demands a different kind of respect now. In Melissa McMahon's room, the air shifts the moment Victoria enters. Melissa is sitting upright when she sees her, eyes fixed, unblinking, as though movement alone might make the image disappear. When the nurse places Victoria back into the bassinet beside the bed, Melissa's hands reach out immediately, fingers trembling as they make contact with warm fabric and living skin, confirming through touch what words alone cannot settle. She exhales fully for the first time in hours. Around her, staff members remain present but restrained, giving space while ensuring nothing is left to chance. Vital signs are checked. Questions are asked and answered succinctly. The room fills again with the quiet, familiar sounds of care. But the rhythm has changed. Every motion now carries intention sharpened by what has already occurred. Across the city, the Amber Alert is canceled. Phones buzz again, screens lighting up with the update, relief spreading unevenly as people absorb the message and release the tension they have been carrying since the alert first appeared. Conversations restart. Cars continue through intersections. The city exhales, returning slowly to itself. Valerie Poulin-Collins does not return to her apartment. She is taken to a hospital under guard, her body stabilized after ingesting a large quantity of prescription medication. Tubes and monitors surround her, machines marking the passage of time with steady beeps, while officers maintain a presence nearby. waiting until she is conscious enough to be questioned. In the days that follow, investigators assemble the case methodically. They review security footage frame by frame, confirming times, movements, points of access. They document the uniform, the badge, the vehicle, the path taken from room to exit. Statements are taken from hospital staff, from Melissa, from Charlene Plante and her friends, each account adding clarity to a sequence that now exists as evidence rather than crisis. When Valerie is interviewed, the story that emerges does not resemble the narratives officers initially consider. There is no demand, no exchange proposed, no attempt to leave the city. Instead, investigators uncover a web of personal deception built carefully over time, maintained through false claims of pregnancy and reinforced by preparation that now reads as both deliberate and fragile. Items purchased in advance, conversations repeated, a name chosen for a child who did not exist. The legal process moves forward deliberately. Before proceedings can continue, a psychiatric evaluation is ordered to determine Valérie Poulin-Collins's capacity to understand the charges against her. Medical professionals assess her mental state, reviewing her history, her diagnoses, and the neurological findings that complicate any simple explanation of intent. The conclusion is clear enough for court to proceed, though the complexity remains. In October 2014, Valerie enters a plea. She admits responsibility for taking Victoria Boisclair from the hospital, for presenting herself as medical staff, for carrying the infant out of the building and into her care. The admission is complete, sparing Melissa and her family the strain of a prolonged trial, anchoring the case in acknowledgement rather than denial. The sentence follows: 2 years less a day to be served in a provincial facility, followed by 3 years of probation. Conditions are imposed with precision. No contact with children, no presence in or near hospitals, mandatory psychological treatment, ongoing supervision designed to limit risk rather than simply punish. In the courtroom, Valérie addresses the family briefly. Her voice is unsteady, her words are limited. She apologizes. Melissa listens without interruption, her posture still, her hands resting protectively over her lap, where Victoria will soon rest again in a world that has grown less abstractly safe. For the hospital, the incident does not close with the verdict. Administrators move quickly to dismantle assumptions that had once guided care. The maternity ward's open access model is reassessed, procedures rewritten, responsibilities clarified, identification protocols tighten, visitor access narrows. Training emphasizes verification over familiarity. Technology follows. Electronic tags are introduced, secured around infants' ankles, integrated into a real-time location system designed to trigger alarms and lock exits if boundaries are crossed. Cameras are repositioned, doors are reinforced. Code Pink protocols are rewritten to favor immediate action over confirmation. Across Quebec, other hospitals take notice. Policies change, budgets shift. What once felt unthinkable is now planned for, not because it is expected to happen again, but because it cannot be allowed to rely on trust alone. Charlene Plante and her friends return to ordinary life without ceremony. They do not give interviews beyond what is required. They do not frame their actions as heroic. They acted because recognition demanded action, because the information in front of them aligned too clearly to ignore. Their role becomes a brief line in official accounts, though its impact remains embedded in the outcome. Melissa leaves the hospital with Victoria days later. She carries her daughter through doors that now feel heavier, watched more closely, her grip firm and protective. Outside, the air is cooler than she remembers, the light different, the city unchanged in ways that feel both comforting and strange. At home, life resumes in fragments, feeding schedules, short stretches of sleep, the small, grounding rituals of caring for a newborn. Yet woven into these routines is a heightened awareness, a vigilance that does not announce itself but shapes every movement, every decision. The night the nursery went silent does not define Victoria's life. It defines a moment when ordinary systems failed and were forced to adapt, when a community responded not with panic alone, but with attention, when recognition traveled faster than fear. The opening image, a hospital room emptied of its smallest occupant, finds its answer not in spectacle, but in return. Victoria sleeps again in her mother's reach, breathing steadily, her presence restored not by chance, but by a chain of actions that held long enough, precisely enough, to bring her home. What happened in Trois-Rivières was not a story about speed or luck alone. It was a story about trust, how easily it moves through familiar spaces, how effortlessly it can be borrowed, and how devastating the cost can be when it is misplaced. It was also a story about attention. One person recognizing a face, choosing not to dismiss the feeling, deciding that uncertainty was not an excuse for inaction. Victoria Boisclair will not remember that night. She will grow up without images of hospital hallways or flashing lights, without awareness of how briefly her life was carried into someone else's hands. But the systems around her, and around countless other children, will remember. They have been reshaped by a single breach, by a silence that lasted just long enough to demand change. Some stories end with answers. This one ends with a question. What do you think made the real difference that night? Technology, community, or the instinct of one person who refused to look away? And in a place built on trust, how much verification is too much? If this story stayed with you, consider sharing it, and subscribe for more deeply reported true crime narratives that examine not just what happened, but why it mattered.